So here we are, and I would like to introduce myself briefly. I am the CEO and founder of Inspirare Communications, and we are a bilingual and public relations and marketing firm. We started here in Austin, Texas, and we mostly work with nonprofit organizations, helping them to develop social marketing and public relations strategy and implementation of those strategies. And we do all of our work in Spanish and English. We've been working for about 5 years in this capacity. And in my previous life, as I keep saying, actually been in Iowa and in Colorado, and then ended up in Texas, but I'm originally from Yucatan, Mexico. And my background is in multicultural training and student affairs education. And then I was also a journalist for several years. So this work really is a passion for me, and I'm very excited to be able to share some of our knowledge with you that will hopefully help you reach out to the audiences and the people that you serve with messages that are clear, that are engaging, and that hopefully will help you provide better services and receive feedback from the audience that you're working with. So let's get us started. First, during this presentation, because we're having a big group and because this is online, we are having a limited opportunity to talk one-on-one and during the presentation. But I want to encourage you that if you have any questions, please share those questions on our chat. And also you can email me. As I mentioned, you will get a copy of this presentation. You can send me an email directly at ceo@inspirarecom.com, and I'll be happy to help you the best way we can if we are not able to do so during the presentation. Also, at the end of the presentation, we will have about 10 minutes for general questions. And throughout the presentation, we will have some breaks during which you will be able to discuss in smaller groups some of the topics that we have been talking about. And hopefully this will be an opportunity also for you to share your own successes, resources, and things that you have learned along the way as you're implementing your social media strategies and talking to your audiences. So this in your screen is our general agenda. We'll be talking about our social media strategy. How can we do effective social media marketing? We're going to talk about your brand and your vision. And as you see, during this presentation, a lot of these concepts come from the business world, but we're going to try to transfer those concepts and apply them to how we work in nonprofit organizations or educational organizations or health promoting organizations, because I think we can learn from both worlds, correct? We will be talking about your audiences and what is it that they want, how to develop the right content for the audience that you are serving, and choosing the right social media channels for the content and the audience that you're seeking to reach. At the end, we will briefly talk about some of the tools that are close to you to measure your success and be able to review your strategy to make sure that you're actually accomplishing those objectives that you set out to do. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, and I'm going to start right off the bat, so some of you are going to be disappointed. And Jeanette, can you tell me one thing I need to do that is going to make it a success, my social media strategy? No, there isn't one single thing. Sometimes people ask during the chats, it's like, when is the best time to post on Facebook? Just like everything, like health, health, there is not a single pill that can give you optimal health, right? It's a series, a social media strategy, a communication strategy is a series of steps that you need to take consistently and effectively to make sure you are reaching your goals. And it takes time and it takes persistence. So since some of you were looking for, okay, give me the 3 things that I need to do to reach, 1 million people. Well, there isn't. So we're going to try to work through this information. And I want to encourage you to look at this as a process that has to be done at the organizational level. A social media, a marketing strategy is something that every member of the organization has to be involved with. It's not just about what posts to put on your social media network, it's about the essence of your organization. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Let me open my chat, so I don't miss if anybody has a quick comment or question. So let's start. Okay, so you're here. So unless you're living under a rock, you already know about Facebook, Instagram, and even some of you are probably dancing to TikTok videos during this pandemic, and having teenagers and following recipes on YouTube and such. But one of the things that it's important to take into consideration is how much social media has really been impacting our lives in the last 10 years. The Pew Research found that 7 in 10 Americans use social media on average, use social media, and a person has an average of 8 social media accounts. What does that mean? They have opened about 8 social media accounts. It doesn't mean that we all are every day updating those 8 social media accounts, but most people have a presence in most social media networks. Now, if you think about that, if you think about the diversity of social media services and networks that we have around us, you're probably coming to this presentation thinking, okay, so where should I put my efforts? Where should I be focusing on? Well, I want you to think first about what does it take to do social media well? And then we will talk about where do we want to do that. So to do social media well, or social media marketing well, we need to create clear goals. We need to have a singular organizational voice. We need to have dialogue. One of the things that is very important to remember is that it's called social media for a reason. One of the challenges that I see with a lot of nonprofit organizations and government agencies is that we use our social media as our bulletin board, as our newsletter, as a way to provide information out, but we don't listen in. And of course, I don't know that I'm looking at, I can't see your faces, but I'm thinking right now, most of you are going to think, oh, wait, that's why we want to know. We don't get any engagement. We've been posting things on Facebook, and me and my office mate are the only ones giving them likes. No one is responding. What's happening? I would love to have tons of comments. Well, just as the wonderful movie said, a lot of people consider if you build it, they will come, right? Was it Fields of Dreams? It's a very popular movie in Iowa for those who are around there. The truth is, it doesn't work quite like that in social media. You can build it, you can publish it, you can share it, but you need to go and find your audiences. And you need to go where they are talking and listen to what they're saying. Now, one of the things that is very important to do social media correctly is to have a dedicated team, at least one person, who is monitoring, who is in charge and responsible for these efforts. We need to understand our platforms and our sites, and we need to be able to have metrics and insights into what we're doing. But for most of the work that we do with grants, for example, right, we have to have some measurements and goals and ways to evaluate our efforts. Many times in social media, we tend to post a flyer as if we had, the same flyer we would post in different physical places, hallways or community centers, and put nice copy on top of it, and then not know exactly who's watching that, who's reading it, or how do we measure if we had engagement. So thankfully, this session is going to give you some insights on how to do this. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is all about communication. And one of the quickest way to remember everything that you're going to hear in this presentation is to remember your W's, right? So every time that you're planning an event, right, or you're planning a press release, for those of you who are from the public relations environment, you always want to know who, what, why, how, when, and where, right? The same applies to your social media strategy. So who is talking? Your organization. And in part, and during this presentation, we're going to focus about the message and the nature and the vision of that organization. Who is talking? Who is listening? In this case, I'm synthesizing this as our farm workers, right? So we as an organization are trying to reach our farm workers. But the thing is that we also need to build listening to them. So it has to be a dialogue. So how are we going to define what is it that we're going to talk about? Are we talking about events? Is that the main, are we talking about campaigns? Every message that we deliver to our audiences has to be based on our mission, our values, and our services. And those have, we're going to nickname those as your brand, So we are all familiar with brands, right? So we see many times we think brands are our logos, our colors, or the type of font that we use. For example, in this case, Inspirare Communications, we have this brand, right? This is the physical manifestation of what we, or the visual manifestation of what we are about. But I'm going to use and you can all see me, right? So you can see our logo here on top, Inspirare. Inspirare, the logo is trying to communicate what we are about, which is communication. If you see, we have two balloons, like talking balloons that connect one with the other. And one of the reasons why we have the yellow and the blue and the green in the middle is because communication happens at the intersection of those messages. So our logo in our case represents what we believe, that communication is varied, is challenging, but we need to find that common ground. We need the P and the R are facing each other because we realize that for communication to be effective, we need to look at each other as we are and listen to each other. So see, I'm using my organization to give you an example of how our brand, our values, and our missions are reflected in our logo. But our logo doesn't detect who we are. It's just a visual manifestation of who we are. So we need to understand first, where do we come from, to be able to then share that information with the audience that we're serving. Now, why do we do this? We do this based on our organizational objectives or goals or desired outcomes. This is going to drive your strategy. How do we do it? Okay, so that is the nitty-gritty of the type of content, the copy, the videos, the graphics. Then we decide where, and that is going to be dependent on all the other 3 or 4 previous labels, as we're talking about our squares, right? What networks we're going to choose is going to depend on the content and the message that we're going to do it. And the least important of it is the timing and the frequency, right? So if our message is strong enough and is reaching the right audiences, it really doesn't make a huge difference if you post it on Facebook at noon or at 6 o'clock. Okay, so I saw some of the questions that some of the participants had, and some of them were based on the timing. So I wanted to dispel that myth. So let's talk about your brand, right? One of the things that we need to keep in mind as we go doing our strategic planning is that your brand is really, as I mentioned, it's not the visual, but it's the sum of how you look, you talk, and you feel towards the people that you are serving and the services that you provide. It's a way to communicate with the world, to differentiate yourself from your competition or other organizations, and be able to create an experience for the people who approach you. So one of the things that we need to understand is, if our mission is to serve people and provide them with information that will improve their lives and their health, we need to look at what our values are and how do we want to establish that relationship with that audience. So this transfers in the way in which we decide what colors to use, what typography, right? If you are an organization that is targeting children, maybe you will choose to use Comic Sans as a font. Don't recommend it. I know all the designers here looking at me like, no, right? But sometimes your font can say a lot about the type of communication that you want to establish. The way in which you organize information, who are you representing in your pictures? I actually saw an organization not too long ago. They didn't have a lot of reach. They had about 100, likes on Facebook. But I looked at their images, and most of their images were stock photos, and they're working with farmers. But most of the farmers they look very Eastern European to me. I actually found one African-American picture in all their content. And that made me think, if I don't see myself represented in the images that the organization is sharing with me, then I'm not going to develop trust and respect, and I'm not going to feel like they're talking to me. We all have heard that in the media right now, that representation matters. Now, I do understand the dilemma of a lot of organizations, because it's very expensive to go out and take pictures. You have to talk to people, get their permission, and most stock images do represent one single group of people, right? So how do we find diverse images? How do we make sure that those images are actually representing our brand and the type of services that we want to provide? Well, the best way is to go get those images out. It is a challenge, but we need to start first by being aware of how those images represent the message that we want to convey to the audiences that we're going to talk about, to talk to. So the first part is, I'm sure this organization didn't mean to alienate other constituents or other communities. It's just a matter of, these are the images that I found, but we need to be aware of and looking at them from the perspective of the people who are seeing these messages. If anything you get out of this presentation is, there's one thing that you need to take home, is that we should not be posting or creating content from the perspective of what I need to say, but what you need to listen to, what resonates with you. Many times we fall into our community or organizational jargon, and we assume that everyone else will understand what we're talking about. So we need to put ourselves in the shoes, in the situation of the people that we're talking to, so our messages will resonate with them and not with our fellow researchers, our fellow staff members, or just our donors, which are important constituents. But at the end, the most important part of our brand, of who we are, is understanding that. We're going to have a few minutes to talk as a group. And I want you to think about your organization as if it was not a nonprofit, but as if it was a brand that you could go to the mall and buy from. So what are we going to call our brand heart? That's going to be our purpose, our mission, our values. Then let's think about what are some of our messagings? What type of voice do we use? Do we talk to people in a language that is above 6th grade level education? Do we use very sophisticated wording? For example, for those of you who do bilingual content, one of the things to keep in mind is, are you talking to people as usted or tú? And those are the ways I know in Spanish, right? Maybe, you might talk to people in other languages. Think about what is the tone that we try to convey, and does that meet the way in which I want my message to be perceived? And the last part is, how do I look at my identity as a brand? How we thought about through, what does it mean for you? So we're going to break now into smaller groups. And we are going to, in those groups, to talk about these questions. Your facilitators are having these questions to share with you. I want to do quickly let you know that you are all getting a copy of our workbook, and I hope you can see this. Can you see the workbook right now here? Okay, great. Okay, so this is your board. You are going to take homework home, okay? So there's so much information, we can't cover it all today. So for all of you, this workbook is going to help you to sit down with your other team members, with your bosses, with everybody who's part of the organization, the interns, volunteers, whoever can be here, to talk about, what your mission, vision, and values are, but what is your story? What makes you unique? What are some of the key messages that your organization wants to convey? And what is your organization's personality? Because that is going to be the foundation about the type of content that you're going to be sharing with your audiences. So I'm going to let now our volunteers to help us break us out into groups, and we will have about 10 minutes to share with our other group members the answers to some of these questions. Hope that here we go. I hope that this was a helpful conversation for you in your small groups. We're going to jump right back in to talk about social media marketing strategy. Now that you had an opportunity to reflect a little bit about your brand, your mission, and your values, we want to talk about, okay, so now what do I do with that information? How do I make it actionable? So most of you have heard about setting SMART goals, right? And many times within organizations, we, especially as we're doing our strategic planning, we can use these SMART goals, and you might have, as part of some of your strategic planning, say, for example, by June 2022, we want to distribute 1,000 disinfectant kits to mothers in the schools within our service area. So that would be a SMART goal. But for marketing, we also need to do those. Why? Because if we want our social media to help us achieve awareness, engage our customer experience, or increase our customer experience, increase referrals, we need to know where we're heading. So we need to know what our goals are and how our communication is going to contribute to achieving those goals. So quickly, I'm going to do a rundown of what your SMART marketing goals could be. This will be something for you to take back again, more homework, to talk with your organization and think about what is it that you want to do and what is it called SMART. So it's called, SMART goals is an acronym for specific, because your goal should include real numbers with deadlines and data. You need to write those dates and numbers so you can hold yourself and your organization accountable and be specific about how you accomplish this. They should be measurable. So when you're setting a goal, you want to make sure that you have a method of how you're going to collect this information as you track your progress. So for example, instead of saying we want to have a more effective social media campaign or email marketing campaign, Then you will say, we want to increase engagement by 20% or opening rates by 20%. Would you want to start by setting a realistic view and audit of where you are right now and setting those goals of where you're going to be? They should be attainable, right? But they also should be inspirational. They should be relevant and to what your priorities and your goals as an organization are. And they should be time bound. So you give yourself certain periods so you can go back and review those. And those are going to help you a lot when you are thinking about advertising or putting more efforts or monies into your social media efforts or marketing efforts. So that is a part of your homework to spend some time on thinking. So some of the examples of SMART goals that I would give for organizations would be, you know, increase by 50% our blog traffic by March, or increase our social media shares by 3% by July. So as you see, we have a number, a specific goal, and a time frame in which we want to accomplish those. So those are essential in thinking about how you're going to be measuring and evaluating your efforts in social media. Okay, let's talk about your target audience right now. How many of you, let's see if we can get a little show of hands here. How many of you have done a target audience evaluation for the people you talk to in your organization? Okay, I see. We have, okay. Can't see everybody, but I see a few people who have. Okay, so what is your audience? So the target audience is the people that your primary audience. Those do you want to talk to? In the nonprofit world, we find many times that our messaging needs to reach our donors, our other researchers, if you are in an academic organization, our staff members, our volunteers, and in this case, for most of you who are joining us, are farm workers. So in this array of people that we're talking to, many times it's easier for us to talk to our fellow staff members or other organizations. And you, as I mentioned before, use the same language and same style that we're accustomed to, that is within our silo, right? What we need to think about is that if our mission is to serve farm workers, we need to be able to construct our messaging in a way that resonates with our farm workers. And that requires for you to step out of your comfort chair or your desk to see what is it, how are they talking to each other? What is the type of images and communication and language style that will resonate most with them? So to do this, generally as marketers, what we end up doing is a work that is called a target audience persona. And what it is a fictional representation of our ideal audience. So this would be what you're seeing on your screen would be a target audience menu that I, in Inspirare Communication, would use to talk to some of my constituents, right? So I would, in a way, it's hard to do this because it is a way of stereotyping, but I will look at, for example, Lupita here, and I will look at her and say, hey, well, you know what? Lupita is about 35 to 40 years old. She's a female, she identifies female. She lives in Kyle. Her preferred language is English, but she speaks Spanish. Some of her interests are scrapbooking and volunteer with a humane society. She, as we see in the picture, she probably coaches soccer for her girls team. Some of her dislikes are people who are not on time. She loves getting a good deal. She likes to be trendy but comfortable. And she's afraid of the possibility of her husband losing his job. So those are big stereotypes that I'm getting at. But why do I, as a marketer, why do I do that? Because it helps me tell a story. So what I would recommend you as you think about your target audience is to think about a person that you actually serve. So perhaps someone with whom you have had interactions or actual personal contact in providing the services that you do. And maybe that person is Roberto. And Roberto has, 4 children. 2 of them are still in Guatemala, and 2 of them he has here in the United States. And his wife works part-time. And you start thinking about, why would I say to Roberto? Because when we think about farm workers as a whole, or audiences as a whole, it's very easy to become institutional and not personable enough where they actually feel like we are having a conversation. So some of the things that we want to think about as we go through this process, and I'm going to jump in here, is to think about cultural competency. Why? Because before we know how to talk to others and what message we want to provide them, we need to understand what are some of our internal biases and what are some of our cultural assumptions. So we need to start first understanding who we are. One of the things that I read, and I would recommend all of you to go back to from the NCFH, is a study about cultural competency and understanding that none of us is ever going to be 100% cultural competent in another culture. So I've been living in the United States for about 25 years, and there's still many things. I can consider myself bilingual and bicultural, but there are many places and circumstances within this country in which I realized, for example, the word revise. Just had an exchange with a colleague of mine where I said, would you revise this? In my brain, revise means review. Can you just take a look at it, right? In his view, revise meant redo it, like completely revise it from scratch, do something new. And the reason why I think it's cultural, and this just happened this morning, so it's very fresh in my mind, is that to me, the word is revisar in Spanish. So it's very easy for me to jump into revise. So I need to understand what my first instinct is, to be able to be aware of some of the roadblocks that I could face in communicating with others. So some of you are thinking, wait a second, this is a social media training. Why are we talking about cultural values? Because one of the biggest challenges for most organizations, especially organizations that work with farm workers, is being able to hone in into the message that's going to resonate with your audience. For some of you, you might share the same cultural principles, but some of you may not. And some of you might think, hey, my parents were Mexican. Most of the people that I'm talking with are Mexican, but you might find later that you have a group of people from Nicaragua who have completely different ways of using vos and usted and tú, right? So we need to first be aware of how do we interpret certain messages. So briefly, I'm going to go over some of the issues that we need to think about in our cultural context to do our own deep thinking and analysis to be aware of how we could misinterpret some of the messaging, or how can we assume that everybody will understand what we mean but what we're saying. So this is, if you want to read more about this, this is very engaging and interesting information to always have. This is one theory of cultural competency. This covers 6 cultural dimensions, and I have a very hard time pronouncing this researcher's name, but we're going to go our best try with Hofstede, because I think that's how you would pronounce it in German. And one of the things that Hofstede says is, when we look at power distance, and in our culture in the United States in general, we have a very flat power distance. We have a view in which the community should be, we all should be equals. We should all accept and expect an equal distribution of power, right? But many people from different cultures will expect a hierarchy in which we have innate inequality, and that we need to talk to the boss first. So how does this could be represented in your conversations with farm workers? Many of you might find that if you approach a big group of people to share a message, some of them will turn and look to someone in the group, kind of like to ask permission to listen. And you will find that you have crew leaders that might not be self-identified, who might not come and tell you, hey, I am the crew leader, but which is the person who distributes the information, who interprets the information, who organizes the crew to make sure that they're getting the resources that they need. So if you are able to think about cultural competency in which, in the sense of, we think if I approach a group and I invite everybody, everybody has their own right to decide if they're going to come to the meeting or they're going to participate. For different cultures, they might look into who is the leader of the crew, or in families, you might have a difference within, is it the husband who has to approve this initiative? Or is it the wife who has to approve? Or which partner in the relationship is the one who's making those choices? And that could be culturally based. Another issue to think about is how do we deal with individualism versus collectivism? And this is reflected in the way in which we deal with privacy, in which we deal with individual rewards, in the way in which we consider the ties that bind us to our community. So, for example, some people might not be a community that is very high in collectivism, might think about opportunities that will maintain harmony within the group, and that is the priority. So maybe I want something, but I'm gonna put my desires and my needs after the needs of the group. So these are things that not only reflect on social media, but also in your general communication with different members of your audiences. How do we, when we talk about masculinity and femininity, many times we think about those roles from the perspective, the stereotypical perspective, and it is a Western stereotype. But let's think about relationships. If we identify masculine roles as strong egos, more assertive, more direct, and this is a terminology that has been used in this type of research, and we take femininity more as an organized society that builds on cooperation, modesty, and consensus. We could look at the United States as a society, or our culture as a more masculine society compared to some Latin American societies, for example, or East Asian societies, where the feelings of pride, individual pride and importance, or money and achievement are more important. Many times people say, and you probably have heard that anecdote of, why fishermen in the small village don't all, organize themselves and save money to buy a bigger jet so they can buy, and fish more fish, so they can then have a big fishing business and be able to have more money. And the fisherman will look at it and say, why would I like to do that? Why would I need to do that? I am happy having my free time and be able to relax. So those are where our cultural assumptions of what is important play into the way in which we communicate motivation and or achievement and importance of achievement. Now, the last part to share with you, regarding 2 parts to share with you, is how do we deal with uncertainty? How much can we help things that are unknown in the way that we think about messaging? Do we think in long-term or short-term orientations? Many of our efforts in communicating have to do with goals and objectives. We're just talking about SMART goals, right? And setting up strategies. But for many other cultures, their perspective is a long past in which past, present, and future are moments within a continuum. How much do I indulge versus restrain? What is my relationship to pleasure and self-discipline versus enjoying life and having fun? So at the end, why am I talking about all these cultural values? Because if you want to talk to Roberto and have a meaningful conversation, we need to think about how Roberto thinks, right? So what are some of the things that we know as facts from our farm workers? 31%, 80% of them are men. About 84% of them speak Spanish. 12% can speak English, and their median level education is at the 6th grade level. Their average age is about 31 years old. So some of the things that we know about farm workers might be that they travel alone, that they're here to support their families, that they have a strong value for their family and their roots and their culture, and that they are still in communication with their home country and trying to improve the lives of those that they see as their family, which might not be only their partner and their kids, it might be also their grandparents and their cousins and the village. So the way we communicate family messages has to take into account some of these perspectives of our farm workers. Now, some of the barriers that we can look at our target audience could be transportation, right? We have an event and we want to be able to invite them over. Do they have a way to get here? Can they speak the language? Do they have a general sense of mistrust? How do we develop that relationship? How do we let them know who we are? Do they have fears due to documentation status? What are some of their attitudes and beliefs? When we talk about health, we need to take into account their thoughts about what's the body, about the spirit, about how do we religious beliefs, and that sometimes are mixed between what we call the organized religion, but also cultural spiritual beliefs about how the body works. And so these are some of the things that as we develop content are very particular to the audience that you're talking to. I don't know if, did we lose? I lost the gallery view, so no, I can't see you all, but I don't know if we are running out of time right now. We're doing well. Okay, great. Okay, so how do we construct our messaging is gonna be very focused on the people that we're talking to. As we get into, I'm sorry, I think I skipped one slide. I got very passionate about this. Here we go. Where's our nonprofit? Okay. So as we talk about our nonprofit audiences, one of the things that is important to think about is that we need to tell a story. We need to recognize who we are, what are the services that we are trying to provide, and where do they come from? What perspective, what way of thinking they have in order to be able to have an effective communication with them. There's the chat. I'm so sorry, I had lost it. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Julie. Okay. Some of the issues that we can face in talking to our audiences is, if you look at the balance between stereotyping and messaging, I will always go with a person that we know, a person that we serve, and what is the common denominator between them. So I previously mentioned of taking a picture of Roberto, right? Having an interview with Roberto will be the best. Maybe if you can get a focus group in which you can present to your audience samples of the content that you have developed. And I will get a good sample, 5 or 10 people will be great to be able to look at your messaging and think about, why are they coming to your network? Why are they coming? What's in there for them in your social media network? One of the things, I'm gonna stop sharing here my screen because I wanna see you all. Can you see me? Okay, great, awesome. So one of the things that many people say is that no one is coming to my, to our Facebook page, or no one is looking at our Instagram posts. And many times I say, in this particular work, before they come to your social media networks, they have to have a personal relationship with you. You have to let them know that your social media network exists. So how many of you, before you took this job, right, follow the CDC and this pandemic, follow the CDC Facebook page? Not many. How many of you follow the IRS Facebook page, right? Why would you? There's nothing exciting for you to look into, right? So what if you look at your social media strategy from the perspective of, I need to let people know through other means and through all my communication avenues that I have a social media network, and what can they expect in our social media networks? What type of information would they have in there? How is it gonna benefit me to give you a like on your Facebook page, to send you a message through Facebook, to send you share a post that you have? One of the things that is for sure is that Hispanics, and I'm going to use Hispanics, so I'm using the people who speak Spanish or are closer to the Spanish language in this country, right? So we could use Latin, Latinx, but in this case, because I'm speaking about language, the people who speak Spanish in the United States are one of the populations with the most active social media presence. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but we had a few minutes extras here, but they use Facebook and social media as their directory. They don't go to Google to look for a page. They go to Facebook to look for information. They get referrals through Facebook. They communicate with their families to Facebook. They send money to Facebook. They sell things through Facebook. How many of you have gone into the groups called, here in Austin and Texas, they're called chacharas? Do y'all know that they exist? Okay, for those of you who might look at me like, what? So these are buy and sell groups in each city in which people offer their services, in which they sell their things. And just in Austin, we have about, I'll say about 30 to 40, and each one of them has between 50 and 80,000 members. So if you want to reach the community, the Spanish-speaking community in Central Texas, you need to go to the cháchara. You need to go where they are. You'll know this, right? You want to start a vaccination campaign, you need to go to the taqueria and put that poster there, right? So same thing, when you do that, it is important to include your social media presence there. So if you have an event, what could you think about will motivate the members of this event for joining your social media, to join your social media network? Perhaps you can raffle a t-shirt or a baseball cap. Say, hey, like our page, register here, like our page, and we'll enter you into this raffle. So one of the things that happens is that, as I said before, not just because you have the network doesn't mean they're going to come. We're going to get to the point where we can do advertising and target them. But the first part is organic reach. And organic reach is a fancy word to say word of mouth, right? Get people talking about the services that they're finding on your pages, and they will come and they will share it. But first they need to know you exist. Now, the other part is, and Jolene, I'm looking at you, so can you tell me how many more minutes we have before the break? 2, awesome. Okay, so the other part is to think about what type of conversations I'm having with them. We're going to talk about social media content, but do they know who you are? Not as an institution, but as a person. So if I wanted to get information about the resources available to farm workers, do I contact the NCFH or do I contact Jolene? I'm much more likely to contact Jolene because there's a name and a face to it, because she's a wonderful person and friendly, and she has this very customer service attitude, right? So that is the same for everything, right? Why do we all hate calling our internet service providers or cell phone providers or AT&T or whatever? I don't want to, I'm just saying one, right? Not randomly, could be T-Mobile or Verizon or whatever. Don't have sponsorships here. We hate doing the type of work because you don't know who's going to answer the phone. You don't know what they stand for, right? The person. You don't know how long are you going to be in wait. So one of the most important things for nonprofits working and trying to connect to their audiences in social media is to become a person. One of the things that we did for one of our organizations that we work with, the Sustainable Food Center, is we actually created a profile of a fictional person that represented the organization to the Spanish-speaking communities. And we call her Camila Sustentable, and you can look her up in Facebook. In Camila Sustentable, it was a cartoon drawing, and she was the voice of the organization. So many of you remember this lizard. I'm going to stop doing brands for other, right? There's a lizard that is very popular for an insurance company, right? So that lizard represents the tone and voice and the messaging of this insurance company. How many of you have developed that persona to talk to Roberto, to embody the messaging, the spirit, and the service vocation that you all have? Because no one goes into nonprofit work for the money. Why, if you're doing this work, right? That person, your organization, or that fictional character should be representing the message and speaking for what you want, and be the listening channel as well. So that is a tip for you of something that you can implement in your organization. We're going to go into a quick break right now to discuss a few items that we've been talking about. So I'm going to invite you to your facilitators are going to talk with you about what are some of your primary audiences? What are some of the challenges and barriers that you have faced in communicating with your audiences? What are some of the cultural beliefs or impasses or mistakes that you have made in trying to communicate with your audiences? And what do you think motivates your audience to reach out and find your messaging? So we're going to take a quick 10-minute break to talk about these issues. And after that, we will have a break so you can get a glass of water or something to eat, go to a restroom and so. So we have about 10 minutes in the small groups and about 8 minutes of break. So I'll let the moderators right now take over and let you know where should you be going. And I already stopped sharing my screen, right? Yeah, awesome. Great. So I hope everybody had a good discussion before we took our break. And one of the things that was in their questions was, what is your story? What is your organization story? And that is one of those issues that sometimes people struggle with. I was saying, what do you mean our story? How we were founded, or I'm sorry, how we started. And one of the things is our story. I'm going to give you an example. For example, I work with the Texas Association of Orthodontists. So when we develop a marketing story for an organization, we take into account everything we have talked about before. We talked about our mission, our vision, our values, the audience that we're talking to, our key messages, right? Our goals. So if I was going to briefly tell you the story of the Texas Association of Orthodontists, would be that orthodontists are dentists that have gone through additional training to provide specialized treatment to people who want to have a healthy smile. And it's important for people to visit their orthodontist, not just because they want to look pretty, but because they can have impacts on their health. So that would be a way of communicating who we are. Or you could call it kind of like an elevator speech if you're into that entrepreneur business dialect, is a way of distilling or synthesizing who we are, what we do, and why we do it in ways in which people can understand what we are about and what can they expect from us. You can add as much detail as you want, but it's important that everyone who's part of your organization understands this story. It can briefly and succinctly and engaging in an engaging form communicate the story of your organization, the reason for being. So that can permeate through all of your messaging. So in case we didn't focus a lot on the definition of that story, that is a way in which I like to explain it. So we've been talking about, all the foundations that are going to help you develop an effective social media content plan. Let's talk about the different types of social media. Creating the right content for your audience involves you knowing what your brand is. So you have here, right, your brand, who your audience is, and then you can reflect that on the content. One of the best ways to know if your content is really reaching the audience that you intend to is, are they sharing that content, right? Most of you, I hope, if you're involved in creating social media strategy for your organization, you also have your personal social media networks, right? And so when we share something on our own profiles, what does that mean? What goes through your head when you say, you know what? I want to post this on my own wall. I want my friends and my family and my colleagues to see this. This is the type of questions that you should be asking yourself when you develop content. And beyond making people laugh, because we all like sharing jokes and memes and funny cat videos. What are some of the things that will resonate, that will make me say, you know what, I want to make that content my own? Well, I want that content to be reusable and powerful, right? So we need to be first aware of the process which our audience goes through. Sorry, I'm trying to get this to knock up. There we go. As we start to communicate. As I mentioned in our before the break, one of the things is people need to know we exist, right? They're not gonna give us a like if we don't know that we are here. So as you think about the strategy for the content you're going to develop and the initiatives that you're going to be implementing, you first need to think about, and this is it's known as the marketing funnel, right? Of the stages within our audience or public or customers go through in the way they communicate with us. First, they need to be aware that we exist, that their services are available. Then we need to have messages that incite consideration for the services that we provide. Then we have those messages and we call it conversion, but it's more of a convincing, right? So are those messages that are gonna incite me to take action, right? So if we were thinking about, and I'm gonna use a vaccination because that's, you know, the closest to our experience right now, vaccination campaign that I need people to know about. They first need to know who the organization is. What is their reputation? Why should I trust you? That would come in the awareness stage. Then the consideration would be looking at the information and saying, you know what, this is a service that I need. This is something that is convenient to me. The conversion would be with my call of action. Do I share this information? Do I register for the service? Do I write back asking for more information? Once our customers or our audience have gone through these first three stages, then we have what we call loyalty, right? So I already went to the vaccination clinic. I already met Mary Ellen and realized, you know, she's okay. She really means well. She's here to give me a good service. So then next time I have a question, I'm gonna email her or I'm gonna send her a text message to make sure that I can share this information with members of my community. So that's the loyalty. The next step after that will be what we call advocacy. That's when you get those community leaders that come to you and they say, hey, Erin, could you send me the flyers by WhatsApp? Because I want to make sure that I have a group of people, they need to know about this resource. So they're no longer waiting for you to send them the information. They become your advocates and your allies in disseminating this information. So as we develop our content, we need to be aware that this is a process. We can't expect advocacy when we have been posting once every 3 months, right? And people don't know the full name of our organization or who the contact person is within the organization to talk to. So as I mentioned right from the beginning of our presentation, this is a process. It's kind of like dating and falling in love. Okay. So what makes good content, right? And to me, I always use that the term shareability. Am I willing to share this with others? Will I wear the t-shirt, right? Do I want to have others identify me with this content? And we all like sharing memes, right? Why? Because it makes us look funny, right? All of us have a persona on social media where we want to portray certain characteristics of who we are. So some people are going to share recipes. Some people are going to share political action activities. And that is telling the world something about ourselves. Not only the information, but it's creating a persona. So you need to think about the audience that you're communicating to and how their friends and families and members are going to perceive them when they share this. So if your flyer is written in a very sophisticated language or very academically inclined language, which alienates some people, people might feel hesitant to share it, right? If your content looks like something that will identify them as either resourceful, helpful, funny, clever, leader, someone who has leadership, your content is more likely to be shareable. So these labels that I have here can help you identify how to, or tag your content internally to say, what are some of the objectives or what are some of the resourcefulness that my content will have. So for example, I would like to have content that is unique and helpful, or meaningful and timely, or educational and entertaining. My recommendation is that you always look at what you're producing through these 8 labels and make sure that you have at least 2, right? And that will tell you, okay, because if I can have very educational content, but if it's not valuable or engaging or timely, why would I share it? And it's not about posting, because you can post everything you want and as often as you want. If people are not commenting or liking is the easiest thing, but sharing it means I have made it my own, and that's the goal, the long-term goal we want to get to. So this will be the stickers that you want to assign to your content. Now, many people have asked me, so Janet, what type of content should we be doing? Do I do, like, what is the recipe for success? There's no recipe for success. Each content has certain appeal and certain need and fulfills certain objectives. But we all know that we are people who are visually more susceptible to visual images, that images communicate a message, I'm blanking on the word, as a whole, right? I don't have to go through steps to understand the message. Images communicate also in a non-verbal way. So those are going to be the ones that pull me in. One of the things that we have to recognize from our generation, and especially in the newer generations, but the way the media works, is that we're reading less and less. I was looking at a copy of a newspaper from 1940, right? And it almost had no pictures, no bullet points, no color, no big bold points, right? Everything was paragraphs and paragraphs, and people were used to that style of communication, and they will sit down and had enough attention span to go through all of it. Now, times have changed. Now, a TikTok, right, video is king. People have an attention span of 5 to 15 seconds, and then they want to move on to something else. So I'm not saying that we need Saul to start doing, funny dancers to tell people about what's coming up for NCFH, but it wouldn't hurt, right? So what we do want to do is give a personal face to the messages that we're sharing. So these numbers and these percentages that I have here are, so 68% of people respond to photos. 50% of people respond to videos. Videos are, and our social media networks are moving towards giving preference to videos. People want to see videos. Now, the trick with videos is that although are very attractive, very few people stay watching the video unless those videos really grabs them from the first 3 to 5 seconds. So if you go to YouTube, you will notice that most videos have become this kind of cheesy commercials that we used to watch on TV before, right? With huge graphics and 5 things you need to do, and people are screaming at you. That doesn't, I'm gonna bet that doesn't go with your brand personality. So what always engages is people stories. Naturally, we are attracted to people's faces. So when you choose a video or an image, make sure that people can see eyes and mouths, right? Most likely, the most effective is people looking directly at a camera, because you know it. If I'm talking to you right now and I'm looking at my camera, you feel like I'm talking to you. And there are 30-something people here, and I don't know you personally, but if I turn to look like this to my screen, suddenly it feels like I'm really not paying attention, right? So your images should mostly feature other people, or be very selective of the elements, the graphic elements. The simpler, the better. Now, there is a study recently regarding not stock image use, because you're not going to be able to go in the fields and get, tons of pictures every day. You do need to use some stock images. Try to edit those images with a frame, with change of color, something that tells the brain, this is different. This is not what I was expecting. Now, 30% of people still respond to written text. 26% of people respond to interactive information, 22 to live. And these are not, if you look at these percentages, you're going to tell me, Jeanette, your math is wrong. They don't add to 100%. Is of the 100 people surveyed, 68% prefer images, 30% prefer content, written content, and so on. So GIFs, surprisingly, are not as popular as one would think. And why is that? Because they're perceived a little bit as gimmicky. However, I will recommend in your content, as you're writing copy, you can write either very short, succinct messages or very long, engaging and storytelling messages. And in those messages, use emojis, use graphic elements to break apart the text. So if you have just one paragraph of about, I would say, I don't know, 350 to 500 characters, it's probably going to get looked over. If you have a whole screen that tells a lot of information, but it's very well organized with blank space in between, more people are going to read it. So what should I do, Jeanette? You're telling me, do I write small or do I write long? Do I have pictures or not? What is important is, what story are you telling? What is the message that you want to communicate? If you are clear about it, then the form will follow the function, okay? So what is very important consideration for nonprofits, and this is from the Facebook Blue Book, I think, or something like that. There's, if you go, I'll send you this in the resources. Facebook has amazing, and I'm using Facebook, actually it's Meta now, right? But those are dominant networks right now. Has great resources to learn how to use their tools. And this is right from that. They're talking about what do nonprofit marketers should consider before creating content. One, be upfront with the problem. So tell people right away, and they use this example, I'm going to use it because we already went through a lot of vaccination campaign examples. Let's say we're trying to save the turtles in the ocean. So talk about the turtles. Don't talk about the organization. Let's say me, Turtles of the World, this will be one example. Turtles of the World We have launched a campaign to pick up plastic because we want to make sure by that time I'm done. I'm skipping to something else. If you start by telling me turtles are dying, turtles need your help, you can make a difference today, I'm going to be like, oh, I understand that problem. I want to know more. Now tell me. So we need to lead with the problem. Same happens for campaigns regarding equipment safety. And I saw some very good narratives regarding, and I think these were from Iowa, regarding safety in grain storage and silos. What things should people do when they walk into a silo to avoid being trampled over, right? Or precautions that they should have. We start by that. What is the problem? And then we talk about the solution. And then we talk about what the people, the statistics, and then we talk about the organization. Show them there's a specific and tangible solution. Explain what action does the people need to take in order to find that solution. And make sure your cause is the hero. Your objective is the hero, not the organization. Share the mic refers to sometimes you don't have to be the spokesperson for your services. Reach out to the members of the community who have benefited from your services and invite them to share some information, some testimonies, some opportunities. What has been the impact of the services that they have received? Join in with other partner organizations to tell their story. Now, you all have heard, I want to beat the algorithm. I know if you're just like me, in the last 2-3 months, you're thinking, what happened? We used to get 10 to 12 to 20 to 30 likes on our posts, and now we have 2. What's happening? Well, many things are happening. One of the things that we have to realize is that our social media networks are also search engines, and people are looking for information that are relevant to the lives they're living day by day. So when we just started the pandemic, people were looking for information about how to stay healthy, how to prevent getting sick. Right now, for example, if you post anything that has to do with and when you see this video, I don't know when you're going to see it, we're going through, Russia just invaded Ukraine a few days ago. If you post any information that would have Russia or Ukraine in the name, you will get 20, 30 post likes, right? And you're going to say, like, why am I getting audiences from places I never knew? Because the social media algorithm is going to show your post as relevant to more people. So there are fluctuations in how your information is shared with others. One thing that is for sure, and I'm going to get to it in a few minutes, is that social media networks are not free anymore. Some of us who are a little bit more, older, remember when Facebook started, right? And we didn't even have pictures at that time. And so time has passed, and as it goes through, it is a business. So you have to pay to play. And you have to realize that Facebook is going to show your content to the people who are putting money into their pockets. So I hope I don't get sued for saying this, but it is the truth. It is a business. So are there things that you can do to boost your organic reach? Absolutely. Engage with others, comment on others' posts, make your presence known to other people. Empathize, be timely, be friendly. What we just talked about is something happening in your community, address that and tie it to your services. Be social and be real. Let people know who you really are. Okay, some topics we talked about: how to use image. maintain your brand, choose certain type of colors, be consistent so people can identify your message. Image-wise, follow the rule of thirds, take a quick photography, quick tip design course to make sure that it's visually pleasant. Now, some people ask about hashtags, and I would like to say that, yes, hashtags are useful in moderation, and as long as they are real hashtags. So you will see that there's this trend of making up your own hashtag. We need to understand what hashtags are for, right? So if I do a hashtag right now, hashtag enjoying digital training with my 35 new friends, no one's gonna look for that hashtag. So a hashtag is a way for you to search information. So your hashtag should be things that are people are looking for. So in your case, some of the hashtags could be health, farm workers, agricultores, recursos agrícolas, información. And they don't necessarily, or information, they don't necessarily have to be the trendiest. But if you have a throwback Thursday of when you started, by any means, use those, right? Let people know about the culture of your organization. Do wisely choose one or two hashtags to represent your organization. Why? Because as you develop this content, then people can use that hashtag to look for events. So I can go into Instagram and look for hashtags NCFH, and I'm going to find all the contact that you have or content that you have shared lately. So choose one or two branded hashtags for your organization. Don't use more than 10 hashtags per post. Be selective and be relevant with your hashtags. Now, repost other people's content. Curate, be a source of information where people can find things that are related to the services that you provide and that are useful to them. Remember those stickers and labels we want? This is what we want to find in your content. Now, always have a social media call to action. And what is this? What do I do with this content? And people think, why do I have to tell people share? Why do I have to tell people like? Why do I have to tell people comment? It's not because people are dumb. It's because there is a certain conditioning that when you read it, you will do it. And so even though we think, well, this is obvious, to the brain, I cannot stop. You all are reading the slide that I just posted, even though I didn't ask you to read it. You're reading it because the words are there. So sometimes those words will motivate you to take action, even though you might not consciously have decided to do so. So call to action always. We are running a little bit out of time because there's so much to cover. I'm going to leave this slide with you. You're going to have this. This is types of contents and ideas of what you can share. These are formats of content. So as we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, first you need to know, why are you posting this? Sometimes people tell me, infographics are super trendy right now. What infographic should I do? And I say, what information do you need to share? And then we can look at what would be the right format. Do we want to do an infographic? Do we want to do a survey? Do we want to do a video? Do we want to do a podcast? So think about the importance and the relevance of your message and what assets do you have? Is this a compelling story? Do I have compelling images? And then choose the format. But this is a good menu of different formats and styles of presenting information that you can share. So, okay, Jolene, she's telling me we're not going to be able to do more breakout rooms, but I have an idea for you all. So we're going to go through all the information, and at the end of the presentation, we're going to give some time for you all to ask questions and to share resources. And by all means, I know you're going to learn so much from each other. So Jolene will tell you some opportunities in which you can connect to go through some of this information together. I want to remind you, though, that this is a work in progress for all of us, right? So in the sense that you're going to have homework, and I want to share with you that in your workbook, you're going to have a lot of information to take back to your office and discuss with your team members to put this plan and all of this content that we have shared with you into action. Does that sound good? Great. Okay. A lot of people might have to leave, and hope you can catch us on the recording. So let's go into your social media channels. I'm going to get a glass of water while you read this. As I mentioned before, almost 7 in 10 people who speak Spanish, and I'm talking because we are talking about target audiences, and a lot of your farm workers are going to be from Spanish-speaking countries or families. So this is very important to realize, is that they use their cell phone and their social media for a lot more than just sharing cat videos, okay? And they spend at least 3 hours more than the general population on their phone and on social media. We Latinos are very talkative and communicative communities. So one of the best things that could happen to us was the social media and the mobile phones. Here we go. What network should I use? What channel? If I was to choose, and we mentioned people usually have about 8 different social media accounts, I would order them like this. I will make sure I have a very robust, updated, active website in which I have information. The idea is that your website is your home. Your social media pages should be directing people to your website. That's where people are going to find all the resources that you are providing. So after that, my priority would be Facebook and their family, or Meta and their family of products. So Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Then I will say Twitter, Pinterest, those are fine, but those will be my priorities. I'm going to go very quickly over this. This is how I try to envision the personality of each of these networks. So Facebook is the place where I can share with others who I am. Remember, if you have a Facebook page, it serves also as you remember the yellow pages? Okay, so same thing, people can find your telephone number, your email, how to contact you. They can message you. Instagram is great to reach younger audiences, and more people are moving there for entertainment purposes because it's image-based. This is a way to show brand culture, organizational culture, but it's not a great place to have flyers about your new workshop because it's very difficult for people to read them. So yes, they are no longer exclusively young, but they trend younger. So if you look at the general population, they're younger in the sense that you don't have people who are over 60 as much in Instagram as you could in Facebook, but more and more people are moving to Instagram because it's a space in which there's not as much advertising from their perspective, and there's not so much politics involved. So it is, audiences in social media networks are always changing, and Instagram is a great way to reach audiences that might be looking for information that is not, how can I say, controversial. Now, from the population that we're talking about, farm workers, WhatsApp is essential. Why? Because WhatsApp allows the consumer, right, to be able to message with their families and friends all across the world without the people in those countries having to pay for text messages. Remember that, for example, in Mexico, until a few months, years, SMS text messaging, they charge you per message. So that's why WhatsApp became so popular, because it was free. And because you have groups that you can get all of your cousins in one group, is very useful to share information. Now, as an organization, you might be thinking, wait a minute, but how do I enter WhatsApp when it's a personal space? One of the ways to do it is to make your services available through WhatsApp, to let people know there's a WhatsApp number in which they can text you and ask questions and belong to the group. There's a way for you to set up your WhatsApp groups in which only you can talk to the group and they can receive the information. Now, I want to prepare you to what's coming, because WhatsApp has it's launching business platforms that allow you to offer a lot of the information that you would have on your Facebook page, but also to have automated responses to certain questions. And what I really like about what WhatsApp is going to be offering soon is that you can label the content and the conversations that you have. So you could label people who need certain specific services and follow up with those conversations based on those labels. So watch out for that in the coming months, years. Now,
and Jeanette,
yes.
Someone asked in the group chat, how effective would you think sharing videos on a WhatsApp group would be?
It would be great if you have a good caption or description of what the video is about. One of the things that we do have to be aware of is that there is a lot of spam and there's a lot of viruses that people are worried about. So always introduce your content. This is a great video that explains this, this, and that, and I'm sharing it with you for this reason. And then it would work that way. It is, so there's a comment regarding TikTok. TikTok is one of the greatest, I agree, growing social media platforms. It's stronger in Spanish language. Yes, it is. But most people do not search on TikTok for workshops or campaigns. However, I would include it in your strategy, and thank you for mentioning that, Sarah, if you have the bandwidth to do it. For most of the people that I have seen your profiles, you have between 300 to 1,000 followers in your Facebook and Instagram accounts. So we'll start with that and then move to TikTok. Now, TikTok allows you to have quick video conversations with people. It's great for awareness, it's a lot harder for relationship building, for communication one-on-one. But if you have the bandwidth and you have the extroverted members in your community who want to be part of TikTok, by all means do so. To me, it's one of the most sophisticated social media strategies that I wouldn't start with. TikTok does not work well for flyers and for static posts. You do need to have a video presence. You need to be very succinct. Yes, if you can do it. And actually, Sarah, if you can share some resources or tips with the community, I think that would be fantastic. I'm focusing on Facebook because those are the networks that most people already have and are working with. I want you to remember that there are many ways. One important thing in developing content is to realize that the content that you develop with certain edits and modifications can be used in several different networks, and you will hit different audiences. So keeping that into account, for example, you could do a story or a reel video for Facebook and for Instagram, edit that video and share it on TikTok. Have a longer version on YouTube and direct people to see if you have a documentary, for example, or a workshop, a web workshop. You can have snippets in those networks and bring people into your YouTube channel where they can see everything. So your network should work integrated. And I am not focusing on Facebook and Instagram to say those are necessarily the best and the only. Those are the most common and the easiest in a way for you to start with. So why? Because from your post, it gives you this plethora of options of what you can do to reach your audience. And on the screen, you can see, you can write a note, you can get bookings, you can send messages, you can publish a job post, you can start question and answer session. It gives you a lot of services in one single platform. Okay, now that we have all this information, how do we execute it? So one of the most important things to do is, a lot of the comments that I saw on your messaging was, social media takes a lot of time. I don't have time day to day to be updating things. You need to plan and schedule. You need to look at your long range objectives for your organization and be periodically posting. I am not giving you a recommendation to post 3 times or 4 times per week on Facebook and Instagram, because that depends on your organization. But you need to know that the more often you post and consistently you post, the better relationships and engagement you're going to have your audiences, and the more people are going to see it. It's just dating. Didn't I just say that? If you only go on a date every 6 months, your relationship is going to be very slow, right? So you want to enamorarlos, right? So talk to them, call them, text them, let them know that you're still alive. So one thing that we can do to do that is to think ahead. So I know right now we're starting March, and there are certain topics that you might think, how does that relate with my health mission? March is Women's History Month. Can I jump into some of those trendy national holidays to give information that are relevant to my audience, right? So if I had men's for equality group, right? Will I talk about Women's History Month? Absolutely. I will talk about how men have supported women in their work for equality. So I can always tie back my content to what's happening worldwide. I can always define my own holidays or my own special themes for the month, for the week, and for the day. So someone one day decided that Thursday was a day to think about the past and share old pictures. Throwback Thursday, I don't know who was the genius who came up with that. But you and within your organization can define that every Tuesday, you're going to provide a healthy tip for families of young children. And every Friday, you're gonna share a blooper that happened in the office. And every Sunday, you will have quote or a reflection about our connection to nature. Those are particular to your organization, to the key messages, to the brand, to the values, to the voice, what we started with. So there is not one size fits all. You need to think about, but it helps if we all define certain schedules and certain rhythm to the communication we're going to have. You're always going to have events that come up that you were not expecting, but it's a lot easier to maintain that communication if you already know what's happening on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, right? So this is a way of looking at a very smaller, sorry, now my language is going away, a way of synthesizing a social media calendar in one single page. In your workbook, however, we are sharing a very popular and I would say classic social media calendar planning that allows you to look at the month as a whole, right? So your colors can define what I was talking about. This is pink is when I'm going to have quotes or blue, right? When I'm going to have webinars, events, campaigns, get to know a staff member, a message from our director, a testimony, and I can spread those different campaigns throughout the month. Based on that, I can start developing content that is not tied in to a certain month. It's just your general repository of content. And then I can just copy paste and say, okay, for this month, this is what we're going to be developing. And using the messaging, I can have a rhythm and cadence of the messaging that I will be sharing with my audience. Now, from this point on, and I'm going to jump into this, I highly recommend use Canva. We don't have the time to go into a deep workshop for Canva. You can see my screen here, but I want to make sure you know that for free or a very small fee, if you need certain extra features, you can create amazing campaigns here, right? So you're already seeing the picture of my parents and my kids there, but you can choose the size of your post, modify it, resize it, include different pictures, include colors that go with your brand, have your brand logo, and look more professional, and make sure that across your communications, you are maintaining a style. Now, what do we do when we develop social media? We do a whole month of posts ahead of time. So we include our messaging, for example, here you will look at some of the posts that we have done. Okay, I'm not gonna wait until that loads up because Canva is slow, but a whole month of posts that then we can attach to this calendar and allows us to know what's coming up. Now, one of the wonderful things is that now you can schedule this information in your, and I'm still using Facebook and Instagram because it's our intro package, right? You can schedule this and plan in your planner on your business Facebook account. You can use either Creator Studio for Facebook, or you can use the business Facebook. Now, I recommend that you all open a business account with Facebook because Creator Studio is getting more limited. And this will allow you to also integrate all of your messaging responses, your advertising, and your metrics and insights into one single place. So this allows me to add and schedule my posts both in Instagram and Facebook at the same time. In the same place, I can look at my insights and see how are my, and I'm moving ahead because we have little time. How can I monitor what's happening with my post? How can I look at, I can select a date range and be able to say, am I having the results that I expected? Remember when we start talking about setting your goals and SMART goals? Here's where I measure if this is working. This is where I look at, okay, see, we are growing. This is happening. But more than that, I can actually look at the content in particular and say, see, we had, hey, that quote from Dr. Alexander, organically, we had a great, 286 likes. That is great and very different, right, from other posts. So we should be doing more of that. And I can analyze that post to tell me, that worked very well on Instagram, but it really didn't work on Facebook. And I can look at what are some of the particulars of my content that allow me to have that success. Now, for some of you, we have a wide variety of people in this workshop, some very sophisticated users of social media and some people who are just starting, who you just find out that's on your job description. This also allows you to see what your audience on social media is. Now, one of the things I want to make sure that people are aware of is your social media audience, as it is right now on Facebook or Instagram, might not be your target audience. I can almost bet you that a big chunk of your social media audience might be past coworkers, your current coworkers, some other people who are friends of the organization who you're working with. You need to make sure that you analyze it and see if you are actually talking at this point in time, and I will conduct an audit for that, to the people you want to talk to, or are you preaching to the choir, right? Because many times we find with nonprofit organizations, and they tell me, I am very surprised. Our Facebook audience, they are all very high income level women living in this region, when they're actually supposedly, working with recent refugees. What's happening is that those are your donors. They're not your primary audience. They are one of your audiences. They might be your donors, right? They might be the people who went to your gala. So it's important to see what is resonated with whom and where they are. And Facebook can give you very good information to look into for that. So I skipped ahead on our presentation, but the important thing is that now you have, these are the screenshots of what I just showed you. Now, I'm gonna let you read this while I take a bit of water.
And Jeanette, while you're doing that, Christopher Benny had a question that he's not able to use Canva. And so is there any other applications that are similar to it? I see some that I've seen, like Adobe Spark, Design Wizard. I don't know if there's any other ones.
Yeah, Canva is just very easy to use. What I would do is Google Canva competitors, and I'm pretty sure that you will find some that are new to the market and might offer some similar features. Now you can always use some graphic design tools, right? In general, I'll try to research some for you if I can, or send me an email and I'll try to find some resources for you in that sense. But yes, right now it's the market dominant. They have been they're very easy to, it's very easy to use. So now, thank you for that question. So going back to one of the important things as a nonprofit organization regarding their social media content and community management is to develop a social media policy. You are going to get haters. You are going to get messages, negative messages. You are going to get spammers. So you need, if you're doing things right, that's what you're expecting to have, right? So you heard this, it's better to have negative publicity than no publicity at all. So if you're getting negative comments, something you did right. You steer the pot somewhere. So you need to define within your organization who is responsible for what. What do you post, right? When do you post? How do you respond? What do you do with negative comments? One general policy we have with most of the nonprofit organizations that we work with is to hide offensive comments, not delete them or block them, but hide the comments. Why? Because that way the person who posted that message thinks the message is still visible because they themselves can see it, but then we can address that privately, that way we don't stir the pot, and let, have more discussions, unless the discussion is helpful and engaging and educational engaging. We do want to promote diversity of opinion, but we don't permit hateful messages. So your policies should be something that you discuss as a staff level. I recommend that not a single person should be responsible for social media, but that should be a responsibility that's shared among several people, because you do need to be available, not 24/7, but people, that's one of the things about social media. People expect immediate response. So the faster you can respond, the better. And you need to make sure that you understand how to handle data and privacy within your organization through social media, because you will collect some information. So we briefly touch, okay, any big questions about this right now. Please post them on the chat and we'll try to address those. I'm going to go now into talking to you a little bit of advertising and promotion. We could do a workshop about advertising and promotion, and it will take us about 6 to 12 hours at least if we wanted to get more in depth, but this will give you a general overview. One of the things is, remember that funnel that we talked about? So many times when you go to post an ad on Facebook or Instagram through the Facebook Business Suite, you will say, okay, what is the goal that I want? And Facebook has kind of a tutorial way of helping you through it. But if this is a way, this slide allows you to see what do they mean by what. So if you want to create general awareness of your services, right? That is your goal, for people to see the information. Then in your advertising goals, you're going to choose reach or brand awareness. If you want people to engage with your content, so for example, you want them to send you a private message through the Facebook Messenger or make an appointment to talk with you, you're going to choose, that's the type of engagement. These are the 4 types of ads that you can choose. If you want people to buy a product, right? Oh, these are lead generation, which means that people are going to give you their email address or fill out a form. That's more of on a commitment basis. These are the goals, the objectives of your ads that you're going to choose. And I see some confused faces. Did I just lost you all? Yeah, I just lost my presentation, so I hope I can get it back. But you can see my screen, right? Okay, so let's go to ads right here. And if I'm going to start a campaign, I'm going to go here. And it's going to give me, when I was talking about goals, this is what it's going to tell me, right? What is it that you want to start with? What is your goal? Now, you can, and I do recommend you play with this. Nothing happens until you put your credit card, right? So play with your business ad platform. Look at the different variables that you have. Assign some time to look at it. So you become familiar with the different features and the different goals and opportunities that you have there. Now, the easiest is to boost existing content, and you can do that, but that limits you to the number and the audience, the type of audience that you're going to reach, right? So ideally, you want to have a mix between content that you're boosting on your page. That means that you already publish it and you're going to make sure that more people see it, and some ads that are going to target a specific objectives or campaigns that you have within your organization. But remember, this goes back to everything that we talked about first. You need to define what your objectives are and how you're going to measure them and what your messages are going to be, so you can actually run campaigns that target those objectives and that bring people to where you want them to be. So another, I'm sorry, let me go back to our slideshows. One of the things that is important to think about is our audiences. How are we going to define our advertising audiences? And this is where you can hate and love Facebook or Meta, because in a way, they have been tracking everything that you do within the platform and outside the platform. As long as you have the network open in your desktop or your phone, they do track a lot of things. Now, for us marketers, that is wonderful. Why? Because I can make sure I can add or send an advertising to someone who is getting engaged within the next 2-3 months and who's going to be planning a wedding, right? So a lot of these features that you look at in this screen right now are issues that people used to be able to target for. Now, Facebook has recently changed your audience interest and characteristics, so they have responded in a way to some of the privacy concerns. And also, you will see that a lot of the engagement decline that you see on your pages is due to the privacy settings for Apple phones. 50% of the people who have a smartphone in the United States have an Apple phone. And so now a lot of the things that we were able to target for are limited. However, when you look at your audience and who you're talking to, how do I know, you don't know them personally to be able to say, do they have teenagers? What are their political affiliations? Do they like this brand or such brand? So you need to look at it geographically. How would I choose an audience? The first thing would be to look at that I'm not running a campaign, an advertising campaign to the whole country. I'm looking at it to the people in the region that I want to talk to. I'm choosing the language of my campaign that the people are going to respond the best. How do they see Facebook or Instagram on their phones? I'm looking at some of their interests. And one of the things that you are capable of doing is, if you do get phone numbers or emails, is that you can upload those lists to your Facebook account to create lookalike audiences of the people that you are trying to target. So your advertising goes to people similar to the people who have already interacted with your page. We talk a little bit about monitoring and evaluation. That is important for you, and this kind of sums up what we're talking about, right? So you develop your brand, your messaging, your audience. You define your channels and your content. You plan and schedule the messaging that you're going to do, and then you measure and evaluate and go back with those results to look again at your content and your schedule and your channels and reflect what you have learned. There's a question. If somebody can read it, I'll try to get back to your question, Mary Ellen, in a minute, as soon as I'm done with this, so I can respond quickly to it. This is your monitoring. You can monitor as per post and look at what type of post, what reach do they have, and reach will be how many people saw that, how many people that post appear on their screen, right? So one thing to know is that it doesn't necessarily mean that they saw or interacted with your post. It appears on their newsfeed, right? So it was distributed to that number of people. What you really want is this part, likes and reaction. And just like you, we're also struggling, right? We need to reshift our strategies, because before we used to have at least 25, 30 likes in a post, same type of post. And we have seen those go down. Now, I will tell you, in the last week and a half, we have seen a huge dip. And a lot has to do with what's happening in the news and where people's attentions are. So I'm going to open it now for questions. I want to quickly let you know that we have included in your workbook kind of a community manager to-do list. And these are things to keep in mind and you should be doing periodically, right? Kind of like your community manager should be responsible for some of these things and periodically be looking at how to improve. And a community manager, I'm referring to the people who manages your social media accounts. So you will find all this planning and what we ask from you is to make a copy of this workbook and personalize it so you can use it with your organization. Okay, so let's open it for questions. Okay, I know Marilyn I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I'm so
That's
sorry.
okay. Do you want me to, I accidentally hit send with a bunch of garble at the end of it. I know, like, for one of the organizations I do social media for, it's a fairly new page, and I feel like it's really just, it's like an echo chamber. It's really reaching my colleagues, and that's not really the ideal primary audience, yet they're useful because they will share. But I thought you said, and I missed it, that there's a way to sort of dissect your analytics to identify like what percentage are those sort of repeat followers or versus reaching new.
Well, yeah, no, Facebook is going to tell you percentages and numbers, right? So it's going to tell you you have most of your audience are women 35 to 55 who live in that city, who speak this language. That's as much as you're going to get back from them. So what I would do is compare your intended audience to the audience that Facebook is reporting and see, are we really talking? Do we intend to talk to women 35 to 54? Or our message was directed to males 31? And look at what the content is. Now, I go back to what I said first, is that we are not investing millions in advertising campaigns and newspaper and TV ads, right? We're not one of those, we're not Adidas, right? Or Nike, where people are going to search for us. So a lot of people might not know the National Center Farmworker Health. But people might go and say, hey, I know who Mario is. I saw him at that event. The trick here is getting your community of volunteers and staff members to let people know that they can follow you on Facebook, right? So one of the things that could be helpful is to do little business cards with your social media networks and let them know what type of information can they find on your social media network. Why would they come to you? So if you had a business card that said, and I'm assuming you have events where you actually interact with the audience, might be in your case, might be a different type of service. But if you have something that lets people know, hey, you can come to us when you need information about tuberculosis vaccine or symptoms, or how to, store, I don't know, agricultural chemicals safely. I don't know. Think about the 5 things that your customer or your audience will think about. Oh, that's useful. Follow us here for more. Give them an incentive to follow you on social media. I would even do small raffles or give them something that is valuable for them to come to your home, which is your virtual home. I hope I kind of answered that question. I wish we had a way to be able to know who our social media followers are at an individual level. You might be surprised, but many times in some of the organizations that I work with, the organization employees never like the page, never like the post, and don't share. So that is also the opposite. Sometimes we have that struggle saying, hey, come on, guys. Do I have any other questions, comments, ideas that you want to share? I know somebody I forgot her name, I think Sarah. If you want to share something about your TikTok strategies, that would be wonderful for people to hear how you have been able to use this platform that has such a great engagement with younger audiences.
If Sarah's here.
Yeah, we might have missed.
Yeah, we have time for one more question and we'll end the recording too, if anyone has any last question. Oh.
Yeah.
Mary Ellen? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to hog the questions, but I there may even be in this group here. I remember another ag safety group saying that in their experience, once you start paying for ads with Facebook, it starts to compromise the reach of your unpaid posts, because they're trying to get you to keep buying ads. Is that, has anyone experienced that, or is there any information you can provide on that?
That is a very interesting comment. I unfortunately wouldn't be able to tell you because whenever we end up start working with an organization, we try to do the whole package. And so I'll be interested in hearing that. It doesn't seem like anyone has firsthand experience with it, but that might be something to consider. Depending on the size of the organization and also the geographical reach that you want to talk to. So if you have a very localized organization in which you're providing services to just a small geographical area, you might be able to do very well with organic engagement, right? Posting, sharing your post to other groups. One of the things I want you to think about your Facebook page and your website as your home, and then bring it out of it. So join groups on Facebook, interact with other people. It is a social network, and we forget about that. So going where people are and engaging in conversation as your page, even when you are not talking about your services, right? So build that credibility of someone who can provide resources and share what others are doing. Other organizations who will provide services that are compatible with yours, right? You might want to share their information in kind of like, say Community Sunday, and get 5 or 6 posts of other organizations and share them there, because you have to build that good social media karma, right? So then when you have an event, you can go back to your sister organization and say, hey, we're doing this, would you help us, right? Same thing when community members are doing a GoFundMe, participate. Even if you can't donate as an organization, help spread the word. One of the things that I see most nonprofit organizations are afraid of doing is being people. It's very easy for us to hide behind the logo, the institutional logo, and some organizations are very serious, right? And they have this distance for a reason, and that might be part of the type of service that you want to provide. But I will say that more and more we need to be personable and let people know there are people behind this organization. Now think about it right now. CDC, we identified Dr. Fauci, I'm going to pronounce it right, for so many years with the organization, right? And so that was a big change. We could put a face to it and we're like, oh, I understand why he's saying this. We need to get to that level with organizations and designate some spokespersons to be able to be the face of the organization and bring the message down.
Thank you so much for the questions. We will send out the recording, and we can end recording now, Sylvia.
Thank you so much, everyone. Feel free to reach me if you have any questions at the beginning of the presentation. You have my contact information, and I'll be happy to provide you with any or direct you to other resources that can help. Thanks.
Yeah, so we'll be sending out a follow-up email with the slides, her contact information, our contact information, so you can also talk to us if there's any assistance that we can provide. And before we go off, don't get off your seats. We got a couple more minutes. I will pass it on to Mario.